Hi, I'm with Trent James Firestine, and I'm very pleased that you're here with me today, Trent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here as well, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be a part of your journey and everyone else that is viewing or listening as well.
I'd like to ask you about a story I saw that you wrote in the Bashar channeled by Daryl Anka group about how your awakening began after you had an anxiety experience and then moved into a new phase. So thank you for sharing that with me, if you would.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, okay, everybody, for our listeners, my whole entire life, I have never dealt with any type of anxiety or panic disorder. However, about 2.5 or 3 years ago, something started to happen. There was what I call a shift, and I didn't realize that's what it was at the time. A lot of other people call this a spiritual awakening. Um, what happened to me, it was a just a regular day, a different chapter in my life where I started to have these memories, right, of things that didn't necessarily happen. For example, I had a memory that my girlfriend at the time and I went out to breakfast at this place, okay, early in the morning after I was done exercising. And I remember walking up the steps and walking into this deli. And I remember ordering the food and explaining to her what it was that she would like to have. And my son was with me, and I was explaining what it was that he would like to have because he's very picky. And I know what he would want to order.
Mhm.
You've never been to that deli. There was a time shortly after I was exercising and I lost track of what I was doing. I lost track of what time it was. I had a set schedule for mostly everything that I did. Other chapters in my life, I was very chaotic. However, I've been working on myself and becoming more organized, right? So I fell into the category of really scheduling everything that I did. Wake up early, wake up at a certain time. I'd go to work, I'd do my exercise, I would eat appropriately and do all these things in order, right? So one of these days I was exercising and I finished. As I came back into my house, I started taking off my exercise gear, right? All my sweaty clothes that I was training in. And in the middle of taking them off, I forgot what it was that I was doing. And I started to put them back on. And I didn't notice this, that I was really doing this. I put my clothes back on and I walked outside to my little training area, my little gym that I have here at my house. And when I opened the door, I saw my weights sitting on the floor right where I left them like 5 minutes before. And when I saw them, I had all these flashes, these memories of just things that haven't happened and things that have happened, and what they weren't integrating. I was confused. I lost track of who I was. I lost track of what time I was, and then I started to question everything that happened during that day. And then I questioned everything that happened during that week, and then I started to question my whole life. All right. So I started to feel this physically, my body, after being confused and not knowing where I was. I thought, am I going insane? Like, what is happening? So I go into the shower. I think, oh, I'm just going to hop in the shower and I'll feel the hot water and I'll be able to go back to, the right mindset of where I am in relation to time and space in the day. So I'm in the shower and I'm shampooing my hair and it's not happening. I'm not cooling off. I'm not gaining any more focus. I'm still very confused. And then when I affirmed that something was happening, something was wrong, something wasn't in alignment. It exacerbated it so much where everything started to get black and my knees started to buckle. And then I started to get dizzy and then I started to get sick to my stomach. And I was sort of like falling over, like in the shower. So I cut the shower off and I get out and I call my girlfriend like right away and I dial her number and she picks up and I say, hey, something's wrong. And at that moment, she could tell that I wasn't myself. Like something was very, very wrong. So she hung up and she got into her car and she drove over to my house. She lives over up the road. She was here in a second. And then she walked in and there I was standing in my, towel, just like confused and like not understanding. And I was very, very, very afraid. And what I was afraid of is that I wasn't sure of who I was. I lost track of everything. I didn't trust who I was. I didn't trust where I was. I didn't know how I got home. I didn't know anything. So we'll fast forward a little bit. and say that, I did some research and figured out what on earth it was that was happening. The feelings of losing track, the feeling of losing control, the feeling that that I was going insane, right? The idea there was that it was an anxiety disorder or a panic attack. Now I've lived my whole entire life and I've never had anything like that happen to me. So it was very, very new to me. So, and all the signs were pointing to that, right? So fast forward a little bit more, happening more frequently and more frequently, where strange memories of things that have never occurred are being like filled into my mind, and I'm getting confused, and it would set me off, and I would have this episode. I started to get into this strange behavior where I was afraid to repeat certain patterns. I was afraid to go to certain places where I might have had an anxiety attack, right? I was afraid to avoid certain places in fear of having a panic attack and doing things outside of a pattern. It ruined my life. I was completely a wreck. It was hard on my relationship. It was hard on my job. It was hard on everything. And the span of this is only, like 2 months, when it got worse and worse and worse.
Mhm.
So fast forward a little bit more, I had blood work done, brain scans done, because I thought I was going insane. I thought I had a neurological disorder. I didn't know what was happening to me, right? But what did help is when I was able to convey it to some people. Now, I was kind of private with this, but there were some people I know in my life that have struggled with anxiety or panic disorders and stuff. So when I would express it to them, they would reassure me that everything was okay and that they felt it too, and they knew what was going on. And then I felt like I wasn't alone, right?
Mhm.
So when that was happening, I was able to go on to my little phone and go onto YouTube and look for um, like neurobiologists, neuroscientists, doctors, psychiatrists, and just learn as much as I can about this, what was happening to me, right? Fast forward again a little bit more. So now we're about a couple months in, and this has been a reoccurring thing. It's bad. It's very bad. It's very challenging. It's a big struggle that I've had in my life. And I would go on to YouTube and I would search for all these things. Anyway, one day after work, I was driving back home. I live on a small island, and I take a ferry to get back and forth off the island. And I was headed to the ferry, and as I'm driving, I just forgot. I forgot if I was going to work or if I was going home. I didn't know if I was going like in the right direction to the ferry or away from the ferry. And I started to get very confused. And right when that happened, I affirmed again that something was wrong. And then I'm driving, right? And I started to breathe heavy. I couldn't catch my breath. And then things started to close in, and I started to get sick to my stomach. I was getting nauseous. I had to pull over. I was like, oh my God, it's happening. And I felt like these tingles all over my body, like it was uncontrollable. And I was certain when this would happen to me every time. I was, with every ounce of my being, certain that I was going to take my last breath and I was going to die. Uh, I was just sure of it. And that was scary too. I thought, this is it. The next thing happening here is someone's going to see my dead body, either lying here on the floor or in a car accident or something, because I'm out of control. Anyway, I pulled over and I got out my phone and I go to YouTube, right? And I see, anxiety meditation. I didn't know what that was like, but I needed some help. I needed something. So I go and I click on the video, and I have my earbuds because I like to listen to stuff like that on YouTube all the time. And I started to do the meditation. It was like a 10-minute meditation. And you need to close your eyes, take deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. And there was a little visualization. It was a guided meditation. And then when I stopped, when the meditation was over, I felt relief. I was back. I was like, wow, it worked. So I continued driving home, right? I'm going to fast forward a little bit more. I started doing these meditations even when I wasn't having a panic attack. They started to subside. They were happening a little less and a little less frequently, but I was still very much enjoying the idea of doing these meditations. I didn't know what it was doing. I didn't know how it was helping, but I knew that it was. I just knew that it was. So aside from doing, now at this point, I would fast forward again a little bit more. So now we're, 4, 5, 6 months down the road from this. I was doing guided meditations, but not just for panic anxiety. I started experimenting and learning more and researching more mindfulness meditation. I was researching Kundalini yoga. I was researching not only anxiety meditations, but different types of meditations that we can do, like chakra alignment, chakra balance. So doing them more and more, and I made an honest commitment with myself to meditate every day because I felt like it's just part of me now. Like I need to meditate each day. So I dedicated, um, 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so each day to meditate. Now, fast forward again to the awakening part. This is the part that changed everything. Now, when this was happening, this transition, what I talked about in the beginning of our call here is that it was a shift in consciousness. I didn't recognize this at the time, but the destructive process of a shift in consciousness or an awakening had already started to take place. And I feel like, this is just my opinion too, that it was manifesting in the form of these anxiety attacks to bring me closer, to bring me more in alignment with my core beliefs. And I didn't even realize this is what was happening, right? So anyway, after months now of doing meditations each day and just really loving researching and studying them, what they do for us, how they affect us on a molecular level, not necessarily being too engaged in a life of spirituality yet. I wasn't there yet, but still doing these meditations, right? What did it for me was one day I was sitting on the lawn and I was getting some sun. This was in the summertime and I was sunbathing, right? And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do a meditation. I had my little earbuds in. I was doing just some guided meditation again, or I was listening to a frequency tone or something, and I was applying what I've learned in meditation. I'm not sure which one it was, whether it was a mindfulness but or transcendental meditation. When I was done, I stopped the meditation and put my phone down and I rolled back over onto my belly and I looked up. This beautiful sunny day, and that moment, everything was different. My life had completely changed in that second of just rolling over. There were the trees across the yard and across the street, and I saw them like they were always there, but I can feel them differently. Now, what I mean by that is when, hypothetically, let's say you have your eyes closed, right? And somebody walks into the room behind you silently, doesn't make a sound. You can sort of feel that they're there. You can feel the presence of somebody. If you grab your arm or someone else's arm or someone's hand, you can feel the life in it. You can feel the etheric energy flowing through everything. Now, I knew my whole life that, trees were alive. They took in, carbon dioxide and emitted oxygen, and they grew and I knew they were alive, but I didn't know they were alive like this. I felt these beings, these trees all around me. And the feeling of them was pushing me over. It was like, wow, like I'm like in the presence of these like giants, these living giants with beliefs and thoughts. And I'm looking at them and how they're dug into the ground, their root system into the ground. And I'm lying down on the ground, right? A big gust of wind came by behind me and moved all the grass. And I watched the grass shudder and shake up across the lawn into the distance. And then it was the idea that every single blade of grass, every leaf on every tree is all a part to a bigger picture. And me lying on that, on the grass in the yard, being grounded and connected to it, I felt more connected to it. It was like I was so much more part of that than I've ever experienced in my life. And I thought, I was like, oh my God, am I having an anxiety attack? Like, what's happening?
Wow.
And then this is another thing. This is really neat. A bee flew right in front of me, and then a bird flew across and through into a nearby tree. And I was watching the bird for a second, and this was it. This was it. I became the bird, right? I became the bee. I became the tree. I became the clouds. I became the oxygen. I became the grass. I became me. I became everything. I was now everything together, unified as like one living, breathing thing. And, as the wind was pushing the trees, they were swaying back and forth. And it's like the movement of that. And then to hear the leaves rustling in the wind, and then again with the grass and the birds, it was all this like this cosmic dance that was happening around myself and everything, and connected on such an intimate level that I'll never be able to shake the idea of what happened. And at that moment, that's when it just everything was changed. I can feel plants, I can feel the trees, I can feel the grass, and that was the beginning of the awakening process for me. So from right after that point, I started to get, now I don't want to use the word obsessed I'll use the word thirsty or hungry. Hungry for knowledge, hungry for more, or I was passionate. I'll use that word. I was more passionate for the idea of just gaining the information on what was happening and being more or integrating more and more the connection that was clearly there now, and how we are all intimately involved in this cosmic dance between every single thing that we can perceive and things that we can't perceive. Um, countless hours and hours. So I would go to work each day and I still had my little YouTube on my phone, right? And instead of looking up meditations, I was looking up spiritual teachers, and gurus, and advisors, stuff like that. So hours and hours and hours of Stuart Wilde and well, now I'm drawing a blank to all the spiritual teachers that I would look up, but whether it would be Sadhguru or Deepak Chopra or Wayne Dyer or name dropping now, but like many videos and many spiritual teachers, I was just drawn to them so much to learn more, and hours and hours and hours, and that's all I was interested in. That's all I wanted to do. So I stopped watching TV. I stopped watching movies. That shift, in consciousness, what I said before about how it changed my life, and that's when everything changed. Now, before that, my whole life, I was very focused on the physical aspects of my life. Now, we all go through our lives and we feel like our bodies and our jobs and our beliefs and our belongings are us. We believe that those are the things that define us. After the spiritual switch, like my big lifted Jeep and my six pack, and stuff like that, and going to the beach and getting tan, which was so important, was now secondary. Now, what was really important to me was becoming more in touch with myself and really understanding who I was, because I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how connected we were. So that was really the beginning stage for it. And that was how everything had changed, where my interests completely changed. And again, so it's 2.5, 3 years ago. And it's just searching and looking, and it's not like I'm forcing myself to listen to spiritual teachers and talks and interviews and conventions. I'm genuinely interested in it. And you said before, this is for this Bashar group. Man, when someone introduced me to Bashar, oh my God.
Tell me more about that. Tell me more about that.
What?
Tell me more about that, about how you got introduced to Bashar and what his role is in your life now.
Oh my God. Bashar. There was a young woman. I don't know if I should say her name. She's in the Bashar group, but we became very close over the internet and through Facebook. But I'll just say, a young woman, right?
Yeah.
After this initial awakening, right, this shift in consciousness, she started popping up on my feed, and she was posting spiritual things, and she seemed, interesting. And I reached out to her and I asked her a question. I asked her something that I've never asked anybody before, especially in a greeting. The first message I ever gave to her was, "Are you a contactee?" And I don't know why I said that. I was just compelled to say that. I've never spoken to anybody else about being a contactee or interdimensional beings or anything like that. They're a big part of my life. Something that I kept secret. Like I said before, I was focused on the physical, aspects of my life. The tan and six pack and my lifted Jeep and money. Interdimensional beings, playing a role in the upbringing of my life, but not really acknowledging it too much, not really being sure, and certainly not talking about it in fear of rejection or fear of, separation. Anyway, so I asked her about if she was a contactee, and she was like, "Yeah." It's like, wow, that's really. I was so pleased and so like happy that she was able to respond to that question and receive it so well. Because I imagined, if someone were to say that to someone, like, what are you, out of your mind? Like, that's how you introduce yourself? Are you a contactee? Like, what do you? She knew exactly what I meant, So we started talking. It was really interesting. We became good friends, and she was like, "Hey, do you know Bashar? Do you listen to Bashar?" I was like, "What is that?" I knew the idea of channeling. I knew the idea of, some people when they're mediums or clairvoyant, and stuff like that. So those ideas weren't something that was new to me. They weren't things that I was disagreeing with. I understood that they were absolutely real, right? So she sent me, I forget how it was, but she directed me to find some information on Bashar, whatever that was. And I started listening to one of his transmissions, and I thought it was really goofy. I was like, what is this? I'm not interested in this. It was like he's not something interested in for some reason. It was just, I thought it was really, really silly and really goofy, so I didn't give it a chance. I was like, I just kind of blew it off. And I was going back, I was listening to other stuff that I would like to learn from, like I said before, like Stuart Wilde, doing the spiritual practices of the 33 steps of the infinite self, and then listening to the teachings of Wayne Dyer and finding that, very helpful and everything. It was a short while, it was maybe like a week later. She was like, Bashar is it. Like all the stuff you talk about, Bashar is on it. He's fast and he's just so clear with what he says. I'm like, okay, I'll go back to it. And I watched an episode again, or I watched a transmission again. I'm drawing the blank now to which transmission it was, but what he was saying was so fast. His advanced answers for the questions that people were asking, like every single thing was just like blowing my mind, and I was like, wow, this is so in touch. And from that point on, I'm absolutely blessed to have learned about Bashar. So again, this was years ago. So now watching over maybe around 200 hours now of Bashar, just going back from transmissions from the 80s and researching them and listening to them and buying them, and then I would write down, I would take a lot of notes, and then I would also get a hold and download the transcripts for some. Like there are some transcripts I go back and I read even today. I mean, there was one called Black Box. If you get for you guys listening, like if you can get a hold of the Black Box transcript, that is an awesome piece of material to have on hand to read, because when we hear him say this stuff, it's integrative, to a certain extent, but it's easy for us to forget it. So when we go back to it and learn it again and again, it really, we really envelop it a lot differently. And then again, when we read it rather than hear it, it has another effect as well. So there's that part of listening to it, and then reading it. And then the next part, which is when he talks about a lot, especially recently, about taking action. We're applying what he has taught, applying what he is conveying, right, into our lives. Because we can listen up and down all day. It doesn't mean anything. Like any amount of knowledge, means nothing if we don't use it. Just like any amount of money means nothing if we don't spend it, right? So that was where I came into the idea of, learning to love, absolutely love Bashar, and so many. He just you can probably tell now, like my vibration has changed so much just by mentioning him. I'm just like full of life and excited. He's good. I think, especially I'm sure, when you're posting this to the group, they're all going to be like, yeah, totally. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that can relate how they started, that they learned about Bashar and they got introduced to Bashar's transmissions and they were maybe turned off a little bit in the beginning. But once you give it a chance, and I was told, she said, she was like, you not like it because it's a negative belief. I was like, what? Yeah. She was right. There was something about it that I wasn't. Something about myself that I believed that wasn't allowing me to accept what he had to convey. And you know what it was? Wow. It was just all the truths of things that he would say. The truth about honesty, being honest with yourself in relation to knowing yourself. And that was a early transition of me getting to know myself and who I was. So there was a lot about me that I didn't know. I didn't want to know because it was very confronting. So those were some of the things why I had these built-in blocks where I wasn't able to receive or accept what Bashar was saying. And I interpret it as, oh, he's just goofy, I don't even know if he's real, a week later, really, taking her advice, I consider her my spiritual teacher. I, can honestly say, with every ounce of my soul, out of all the hundreds and hundreds of hours of spiritual teachers and advisors and gurus and that I've listened to, Bashar, man, he's the top. He is the top. But don't get me wrong, I really want to convey to you that there are many other avenues that I search for. Different, for example, I just read Science of Mind. That's a spiritual, very long spiritual book. The founder of New Thought wrote that. The Four Agreements. That was a book that I just read recently, and I read the audiobook. Again, it's not Bashar, but it's similar messages. And when we hear those same messages, right, from different perspectives, we're able to integrate them, I feel, in different ways, in better ways, more ways, because no matter how many times I listen to a spiritual message, it could be the same type of message, whether it's on law of attraction or anything like that. It could be the same message, but there's other perspectives that it's shown in where I'm able to receive it in a different way, right? So that's sort of, how that, I mean, that's my standing with the bee. Like, if it's not the bee, not for me.
Yeah.
But that's not.
I want to ask you, did you, before you found Bashar, you obviously were interested in extraterrestrials, right? Or because you had asked that woman if she was a contactee. So
Yeah.
did you feel you were a contactee as well at that time before you found Bashar?
Well, that's really interesting you say that. I can remember growing up as a young kid, and I had notebooks through high school and middle school, notebooks of just sketches of grays, right? I don't know why. That's all I was interested in drawing. But this is a really interesting thing. When I was very young, living with my mother, the TV would have the commercials on during the day, and it'd be a commercial for sightings, or unsolved mysteries or UFO files, right? And I'd say, "Hey, Mom, I want to watch that tonight. It's on at 8, sightings," and I'd be like really excited to watch it. And this is talking about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, 12 years old, 13, 14 years old, 15 years old. I was getting up there. This was happening to me. I would ask to watch these shows, okay, and then the time would come, it'd be 8 o'clock or whatever. My mom would call out, "Hey, Trent, the show you wanted to watch is on. Put it on History Channel or Discovery or whatever channel it's on." Within moments, watching one of those shows, one of those documentaries, UFOs and stuff, or alien contactee stories or conventions or whatever. Within moments, I would box up and I would start to cry, and I would crawl up into like a ball, and I would start crying, and my mom would have to turn it off. She didn't think much of it. She thought it was kind of strange, but she didn't think anything. So what I said before, what I said a moment ago, is that this was happening, 5 years old all the way till 15 years old.
Mm-hmm. So you really felt drawn to watch those shows, but they upset you when you watched them, huh?
Yeah, horrified. I couldn't explain why. I didn't understand what was happening when this happened, but I was so interested in the idea of extraterrestrial life. Mm-hmm. When I was confronted with just an image of a gray on the television, just caused me to. I was just totally paralyzed, and I would start to weep. It was just so impactful. I couldn't understand it, and at the same time, I had during daylight hours, at school, and I'd be drawing and doodling. I just drew grays, just grays. That's all. I thought they were. I don't know what I thought. I thought they were cool, but I just wanted. So I ended up compiling like notebooks full of just pictures of grays, right? And I've never. I don't remember ever having a physical experience being a contactee or anything like that. However, there's one scenario that after coming to realization, listening to Bashar, talking with her about it, and as I told her this happened to me, and she was like, "You're absolutely a contactee." She was like, "It's adorable," and I was like, "Wow, like really?" That's what that was her point of view. That was her opinion, right? Mm-hmm. When I was really young, when I was like 3 years old, we lived in a house here in Sag Harbor, my mother and my stepfather, and maybe I was like 2 or 3. So I was a toddler, just coming out of my toddlerness, right? Apparently, I would always tell my mother and stepfather about the lady with the cats. I was constantly talking about this lady who would come with all these cats. and I would say that they were coming and they were seeing me, and I would like to pet the cats, and I would see the cats, and they thought, they were like, well, it's kind of weird, and they're not really spiritual or anything, but there's a common idea, that when children are young, they're able to perceive into other, dimensions or realities, and I guess they took it as, like when animals maybe are able to see a little bit into the spirit realm, or they associate it with something like that. Because I was so young, they were like, "Oh, he must be seeing some ghosts." And I don't recall doing this or saying these things, but I remember them very, very clearly telling me afterwards when I was, 7 or 8 years old, like, "Yeah, when you were little, all you would talk about is this lady with the cats, and you would say that there's cats all over the place. That's really, really strange." All right, so now, fast forward years and years and years later to very recently, I'm at my house, and I'm looking out the window. And this was after talking. This was after my spiritual awakening. This was after all of that. I'm looking out my window, and there's in the woods. I can see from my window. I see this little creature, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like squinting. I'm like, oh my god, like what is that? Like, is that an is that an extraterrestrial? And then it changes, and it's a cat. And right when that happened, when it shifted its face a little bit, right? And then I saw that it was just a kitten. We have a couple of cats that live here at my house. Right?
Mhm.
When I had that notion, when I recognized that I made that mistake,
Mhm.
that misconception or mistaking a cat for an ET, all those times my stepfather and mother told me, "Oh, you were always talking about the cats, talking about the cats, talking about the cat." It came to me, and I felt this feeling in my chest when I had the thought of I wasn't seeing ghost cats. I wasn't seeing a ghost lady. I was being visited.
Oh,
Yeah. So
amazing.
again, I don't remember that happening,
Mhm.
but this is really neat. Like when I was able to when I was able to make that connection, put that thought together, the feeling, that we're taught to, focus on our feelings and how we feel at those moments. And we understand that our feelings are there for a reason. They're there to tell us something. That's the way that our higher mind or our subconscious mind speaks with us through our feelings and emotions. The fact that when I made that connection, that I mistook a cat for an extraterrestrial for a second, sent this shockwave through my chest, like nothing I've ever felt before. And then it just made sense, right? So that is where ETs come into play with me, and why I asked her that particular question, because I've always been interested in them. I've had this insane fear, right, for a very, very long time, which I have overcame because of Bashar,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Uh, One of the things, so that was like the introduction to extraterrestrials into my life. And again, I'm not open about that with anybody really, but I'm happy for you to share this anywhere that you want, of
Oh,
course. I mean, I think that it's a beautiful thing, and I think that more and more people, are going through this awakening process, going through this shift in consciousness. And I believe, with every ounce of my being, that it's happening at an accelerated rate. And the idea of disclosure and ET life, being in constant contact, communicating with us, not as some external being, but more as a spiritual, right, counterpart to our own selves. One of the biggest things that really did it for me was thinking of extraterrestrial beings. Whether it was like ETs or tall whites or whatever silly name we have for them, right? Thinking of them as these external things, but not necessarily putting together the idea that coming from a spiritual standpoint is really where though that those scenarios lie in. Coming to the idea again, this is kind of advanced. When I was, wondering about ETs and UFOs and sightings, we often look to the stars for this stuff. But I'm sure that now we look inside. If we're concerned, or if we're looking, about ET contact or interdimensional beings, coming into the understanding, that an alternate dimension, isn't a place between here and the stars. It's a state of consciousness. It's a state within. It's looking inside ourselves. So again, understanding that ETs are just representations or extensions of our own consciousness. That was one of the things that really helped me understand what was happening here, what I was feeling, and what I was seeing. And then again, too, there was one transmission I'll never forget. I was listening to Bashar, and a young man said that he experienced this tremendous fear when it came to the idea of encountering an ET. I think he was talking about an abduction scenario that happened in the 80s. Right?
Mhm.
Bashar said, "It's not them that you're afraid of, it's yourself." How my ears went up. I'm thinking, I'm like, what's he talking about? What's he mean by that? So he goes, it's the idea that these beings can come into your house and you have no control. He's like, it's not the idea that you're afraid of them. It's you're afraid of losing control. So there's an aspect of your life, and he was making all these connections, and I was like, oh my God, like my heart was like beating. I was like, this is amazing. So I was able to, I guess, consider those particular attributes from that transmission into my own, or integrate them into my own scenario, my own experience, and find some closure and find some peace with the idea. And also another part too that really, really helped me out was in a few transmissions. Of course, I'm drawing a blank to the names of when Bashar would talk about the idea of sleep paralysis and it not necessarily being what we think. Talking about the idea of sleep paralysis is sometimes when we're in a dream state, we could be shifting through multiple, realities at once, like we're constantly doing. But to think of it more as like a seatbelt, right? Because if we get shifted to an alternate reality and we, don't end up where we're supposed to be and we go floating off into some other, spot. So the idea that it was a good thing, really helped me. So sleep paralysis being a good thing, letting it happen, allowing it in, allowing it to happen and take its course, right? Same goes for a contact experience. Allow it to happen. Okay. Now, my life, right? I'm I'm an independent fitness instructor, and I'm also an elite fitness coach, and I'm a life coach, and I do guided meditations. I wrote a book recently on fitness and nutrition, right? I'm currently in the middle of writing a book, a fiction book on alien contactee stories. So that's one of the ways where my life has completely changed. So outside of what I thought was very, very important, fitness and nutrition, I believe, is very, very important. But the idea of holistic, or the idea of holism, where mind, body, and spirit are very much connected, right? So fitness, nutrition, meditation, all go hand in hand together. So it sort of brought me to an area where I was able to use my imagination and use my talents and put together a book of ET contact. So thanks for your synchronicity in asking about that.
That sounds very intriguing. I'm sure if when you're done that, please share it with our group, and but a lot of people would be interested in that.